Here's something that will disturb you. The person who gets promoted over you, who commands respect in every room they enter, who seems to effortlessly bend others to their will, they're not necessarily smarter, more talented, or harder working than you. They've simply mastered something you haven't. They understand that respect isn't earned through kindness, competence, or moral virtue. Respect is taken through calculated displays of power, strategic manipulation, and ruthless control over perception. If this makes you uncomfortable, good. Because what I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you believed about human nature and success. You've been living a lie. Society has programmed you to believe that being a good person, working hard, and treating others fairly will naturally lead to respect and authority. This is perhaps the most destructive myth ever sold to the masses. While you're busy being ethical and considerate, others are studying the dark arts of influence, implementing Machiavellian strategies that guarantee them positions of power while you remain invisible, overlooked, and ultimately powerless. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most people refuse to accept. People don't respect what's good for them. They respect what they fear to lose. They don't follow the most moral leader. They follow the most powerful one. They don't admire the kindest person in the room. They submit to the one who controls the room. This isn't cynicism. This is reality, stripped of its comfortable illusions. Let me tell you about David, a software engineer I knew who embodied everything society tells us to value. Brilliant mind, incredible work ethic, always willing to help colleagues, never spoke poorly of anyone. For 5 years, he watched as less competent people got promoted above him. He couldn't understand why his dedication wasn't rewarded, why his expertise wasn't recognized, why his kindness wasn't appreciated. David was suffering from what I call the nice guy paradox, the belief that virtue alone creates value in other people's eyes. The truth David never grasped is that respect operates on primal, often unconscious levels that have nothing to do with merit or morality. When someone enters a room, within seconds, everyone's brain is making rapid calculations about status, threat level, and dominance hierarchy. These calculations happen below the threshold of conscious awareness, but they determine everything about how that person will be treated, listened to, and valued. Consider Marcus, David's colleague, who started at the same company 6 months later. Marcus wasn't smarter than David. His code wasn't cleaner. His solutions weren't more elegant. But Marcus understood something David didn't. He understood that authority isn't granted, it's assumed. From his first day, Marcus carried himself like someone who expected to be listened to. When he spoke in meetings, he didn't preface his ideas with uncertainty or self-deprecation. He stated his positions with conviction, even when he wasn't completely sure. When colleagues asked for help, Marcus would occasionally say no, not because he was too busy, but because he understood that constant availability signals low value. Within 18 months, Marcus was promoted to team lead. David remained a senior developer. The difference wasn't competence. It was the understanding and application of power dynamics. Marcus had internalized the first principle of Machiavellian authority. Perception is reality, and reality is what you make others believe about you. Now, before you dismiss this as toxic or manipulative behavior, understand that these dynamics exist whether you acknowledge them or not. The question is, and whether you'll participate in power games. You're already participating simply by existing in any social or professional hierarchy. The question is whether you'll play consciously and strategically, or continue being an unwitting victim of others who understand the rules better than you do. If you're starting to see how these principles might apply to your own life, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because what I'm about to share next will completely transform how you navigate every relationship and interaction you have. The strategies I'm about to reveal have been used by leaders, CEOs, and influential figures throughout history, and most people will never hear them explained this clearly. The foundation of Machiavellian authority rests on 3 core principles that most people violate daily without realizing it. First, the principle of calculated unpredictability. Humans are pattern recognition machines, constantly trying to predict and categorize the behavior of others. When someone becomes completely predictable, they lose their psychological leverage. Think about the people in your life who command the most respect and attention. They're not the ones who respond to every text immediately, who always say yes to requests, or who react the same way to every situation. Strategic unpredictability creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the same psychological mechanism that makes gambling addictive. When someone can't predict your responses, your attention becomes more valuable, your approval more sought after, your presence more impactful. This doesn't mean being chaotic or unreliable in ways that damage your reputation. It means being selectively inconsistent in ways that keep others psychologically engaged and slightly off balance. Sarah, a marketing director I coached, transformed her career by implementing this principle. She had been the reliable team member everyone counted on, always available, always accommodating. She was well liked but not respected, valued but not powerful. I taught her to introduce strategic delays in her responses, to occasionally decline requests that weren't essential, and to vary her emotional availability. Within 3 months, her colleagues began treating her differently. They started asking for her opinion more frequently, including her in higher-level discussions, and generally showing her more deference. The second principle is the strategic use of contrast and scarcity. People value what they can't easily obtain and what stands out from the norm. If you're always agreeable, your occasional disagreement becomes powerful. If you're always available, your time becomes less precious. If you always give your opinion, your silence becomes more noticeable. This principle operates on the basic economic law of supply and demand applied to human psychology. Most people make the mistake of being consistently generous with their time, attention, and emotional energy, thinking this will make them more valued. Instead, it makes them more taken for granted. The person who helps everyone with everything becomes the person whose help is expected, not appreciated. The person who shares every thought and feeling becomes the person whose thoughts and feelings are ignored, not cherished. Consider how celebrities and high-status individuals naturally embody this principle. They don't respond to every interview request, don't accept every invitation, don't share every personal detail. Their scarcity creates demand. Their selectivity creates value. Their boundaries create respect. The third principle is what Machiavelli called the strategic use of fear and love, though he famously concluded, "It's better to be feared than loved if you can't be both." This doesn't mean being cruel or abusive. That's not strategic. It's simply destructive. It means understanding that respect often comes from others, recognizing you have the power to affect their lives, careers, or emotional well-being, and choosing to use that power benevolently. This principle manifests in subtle ways that most people never recognize. The manager who everyone respects is not just the one who's fair and supportive. They are the one who everyone knows could make their work life difficult if necessary, but chooses not to. The friend who commands the most loyalty isn't just the one who's always kind. They are the one who others know could withdraw their friendship and support, making that kindness feel more precious and earned. The implementation of these principles requires what I call calibrated authenticity, being genuinely yourself while strategically choosing which aspects of yourself to reveal, when, and to whom. This isn't about becoming a different person. It's about becoming a more conscious and strategic version of who you already are. Take the way you communicate, for example. Most people either over-explain their positions, weakening them with unnecessary justification, or under-explain them, leaving others confused about their intentions. Strategic communicators find the balance point. They provide enough information to be clear and credible, but not so much that they appear uncertain or desperate for approval. When someone challenges your decision or position, the natural tendency is either to become defensive and over-justify, or to immediately accommodate their objection. Both responses signal insecurity and invite further challenges. The Machiavellian response is to acknowledge their perspective without necessarily changing your position, demonstrating that you're confident enough to hear disagreement without being threatened by it. This might sound like, "I understand you see it differently, and I've considered that perspective. I'm confident this is the right approach for now." No defensiveness, no aggression, no accommodation unless you genuinely believe it's warranted. just calm confidence in your judgment. The same principle applies to how you handle mistakes and failures. Most people either refuse to acknowledge errors, making them appear arrogant and disconnected, or over-apologize for them, making them appear weak and unreliable. The strategic approach is to acknowledge mistakes quickly and matter-of-factly, focus on solutions rather than self-flagellation, and move forward without dwelling on what went wrong. Comment below if you've ever noticed how some people seem to command respect effortlessly while others struggle for recognition despite being equally competent. I want to hear your experiences with these dynamics because understanding them is the first step to mastering them. Now, let's talk about the most counterintuitive aspect of Machiavellian authority, the strategic use of vulnerability and strength. Most people think these are opposites. You're either vulnerable or strong, open or protected, soft or hard. This binary thinking leaves them either too guarded to connect with others or too open to maintain respect. The sophisticated approach is understanding that strategic vulnerability demonstrates strength, while strategic strength creates space for genuine connection. When someone who is clearly powerful and self-possessed chooses to share something personal or admit uncertainty about something, it doesn't make them appear weak. It makes them appear human and trustworthy. But this only works if the baseline perception is strength and competence. Think about the leaders you most respect and trust. They're not the ones who never show any uncertainty or personal struggles, nor are they the ones who constantly overshare every doubt and difficulty. They're the ones who project overall competence and strength, but occasionally let you see behind the curtain in carefully chosen moments. This principle extends to how you handle conflicts and disagreements. The person who never stands up for themselves appears weak and gets walked over. The person who fights every battle appears insecure and exhausting. The person who chooses their battles carefully, stands firm when it matters, and lets smaller issues go appears confident and strategic. I once worked with a CEO named Alexandra who had built a successful company but struggled with a board member who consistently undermined her in meetings. Her initial approach was to address every challenge immediately and thoroughly, providing detailed explanations for every decision. This made her appear defensive and gave the board member more ammunition for criticism. We shifted her strategy to what I call strategic disengagement with selective engagement. She stopped responding to minor criticisms and petty challenges, treating them as beneath her attention. But when the board member crossed significant lines or made claims that could damage the company, she would respond with devastating precision, armed with facts and delivered with calm authority. The psychological effect was remarkable. The board member's constant sniping began to look petty and personal, rather than professional and legitimate. Other board members started seeing the dynamic clearly and began shutting down the disruptive behavior themselves. Alexandra's authority actually increased because she demonstrated that she was secure enough to ignore small provocations, but powerful enough to decisively handle real challenges. This brings us to one of the most important aspects of Machiavellian authority: understanding the difference between respect and likability, and knowing when each one serves your interest better. Our culture has confused these concepts, leading people to believe they need to be liked to be effective. This confusion has created an entire generation of people who seek approval rather than results, who prioritize being agreeable over being right, who choose comfort over growth. Respect is based on recognition of your competence, judgment, and power to affect outcomes. Likability is based on how comfortable and pleasant others feel around you. Sometimes these align, but often they don't. The person who always tells you what you want to hear might be likable, but you won't trust them with important decisions. The person who tells you hard truths you need to hear might be less immediately pleasant, but you'll respect their judgment and seek their advice. The strategic approach is to be selective about when you prioritize each one. In situations where you need compliance, cooperation, or ongoing relationships, likability matters more. In situations where you need credibility, authority, or decisive action, respect matters more. The key is consciously choosing which one to optimize for based on your objectives, not defaulting to likability because it feels safer. This conscious choice-making extends to every aspect of how you present yourself and interact with others. Your clothing, your posture, your tone of voice, your response time to messages, your availability for meetings. All of these are signals that others use to determine your status and value. Most people send these signals unconsciously and inconsistently, undermining their own authority without realizing it. Take something as simple as how you enter a room. Most people either rush in apologetically, as if they're intruding, or swagger in aggressively, as if they're trying to prove something. Neither approach commands natural respect. The strategic approach is to enter with calm confidence, as if you belong there and expect to be welcomed, but without needing to prove or announce your presence. The same principle applies to how you participate in conversations and meetings. Many people either dominate every discussion, making them appear insecure and attention-seeking, or contribute minimally, making them appear unengaged or lacking in ideas. The strategic approach is to contribute meaningfully when you have something valuable to add. Ask questions that demonstrate deep thinking, and know when your silence will have more impact than your words. One of the most powerful techniques in the Machiavellian toolkit is what I call strategic alliance building. This isn't about manipulating people into relationships they don't want. That's unsustainable and ultimately self-defeating. It's about understanding that all significant achievements require the cooperation and support of others, and being intentional about building and maintaining those relationships. Most people approach relationship building backwards. They wait until they need something from someone before trying to build a connection, making their motives transparent and their approach feel transactional. Or they try to build relationships with everyone equally, spreading their efforts so thin that they develop no deep connections with anyone. The strategic approach is to identify the key relationships that will be important for your long-term objectives and invest in those relationships consistently over time, especially when you don't need anything from them. This means remembering important details about their lives, supporting their initiatives when possible, and being genuinely interested in their success. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think this means being constantly helpful and accommodating. Actually, the most valuable relationships are built on mutual respect and reciprocity, not one-sided giving. If you're always the one helping, supporting, and accommodating, you train others to see you as a resource to be used, rather than a partner to be valued. The key is calibrated reciprocity, being helpful and supportive in ways that demonstrate your value and capability, while also setting boundaries that maintain your self-respect and prevent others from taking advantage of your generosity. This creates relationships where others see you as both valuable and independent, someone worth investing in rather than someone they can take for granted. Let me share a story that illustrates how these principles work in combination. Michael was a talented architect who had been passed over for partner at his firm 3 times. He was technically excellent, well liked by clients, and put in long hours, but he couldn't understand why less experienced colleagues were advancing faster than him. The problem was that Michael had positioned himself as the reliable workhorse rather than the strategic leader. He said yes to every project, worked on weekends regularly, and never challenged decisions from senior partners, even when he disagreed with them. His dedication was appreciated, but it wasn't respected in the way that leads to advancement. We worked together to strategically reposition him within the firm. First, he began saying no to projects that didn't align with his expertise or career objectives, explaining his decisions in terms of providing the best value to the firm rather than simply being accommodating. Second, he started contributing more assertively in partner meetings, offering well-reasoned alternative perspectives when he disagreed with proposed directions. Most importantly, he began building strategic alliances with key clients and industry contacts outside the firm, positioning himself as a thought leader rather than just a service provider. He started speaking at conferences, writing articles for industry publications, and hosting networking events that brought value to his firm while building his own reputation. The transformation took about 18 months, but the results were dramatic. Michael wasn't just promoted to partner, he was put in charge of a new division focused on sustainable architecture, an area where he had developed particular expertise. His colleagues didn't just respect his technical skills anymore. They respected his judgment, his strategic thinking, and his ability to bring in new business. The difference wasn't that Michael became a different person. He was still hardworking, still technically excellent, still ethical and professional. But he had learned to package and present those qualities in ways that commanded respect, rather than just appreciation. This brings us to perhaps the most important aspect of Machiavellian authority, the long-term perspective. Many of the strategies I've described require short-term sacrifice of comfort, approval, or immediate gratification in service of long-term respect and influence. This is why most people never develop real authority. They're unwilling to endure temporary discomfort for lasting power. When you start implementing these principles, some people won't like the changes. Those who benefited from your previous patterns of over-accommodation and constant availability will resist your new boundaries. Some may try to guilt you back into old patterns by suggesting you've become selfish or difficult. This resistance is actually a good sign. It means you're shifting the power dynamics in ways that serve you better. The people who truly respect and value you will adapt to your new standards and may even respect you more for setting them. The people who don't adapt weren't really invested in your well-being anyway. They were just comfortable with the old arrangement that served them better than it served you. The key during this transition period is consistency and patience. You can't implement these strategies sporadically and expect lasting results. Others need time to adjust their perceptions and expectations of you. If you set a boundary one day and abandon it the next, you'll actually lose credibility and respect rather than gaining it. This is why I recommend starting with small, manageable changes and building gradually rather than trying to transform everything at once. Maybe you begin by introducing slight delays in your response times to non-urgent communications, or you start declining one low-value request per week while being helpful with more important matters. Or you practice stating your opinions with more conviction in low-stakes situations before applying this principle to more significant interactions. Each small victory builds your confidence and others' perception of your authority, making the next level of implementation easier and more natural. Remember, you're not trying to become someone else. You're trying to become the most strategically effective version of who you already are. The ultimate goal of mastering these Machiavellian principles isn't to manipulate or harm others. It's to ensure that your true value is recognized and rewarded, that your contributions are appreciated rather than taken for granted, and that you have the influence necessary to create positive outcomes for yourself and others. When you command genuine respect, you can be more generous and helpful because your generosity comes from a position of strength rather than need. When you have real authority, you can use it to protect and advance not just your own interests, but the interests of those you care about. When you understand power dynamics, you can navigate them more ethically and effectively than those who pretend they don't exist. The harsh reality is that power exists in every human interaction, every workplace, every relationship. The question isn't whether you'll encounter power dynamics. You will. The question is whether you'll understand them well enough to use them constructively, or whether you'll remain unconscious of them and consistently find yourself at a disadvantage. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever noticed these dynamics playing out in your own life? Have you seen people command respect in ways that did not seem to match their technical qualifications or moral character? Share your observations, because recognizing these patterns in others is the first step to implementing them yourself. The path to respect isn't always comfortable, but it's always worth walking. The alternative, remaining invisible, undervalued, and powerless while watching others with inferior skills and ethics advance past you, is far more painful than the temporary discomfort of learning to value yourself appropriately and demand that others do the same. Master these principles, implement them consistently, and watch as your relationships, career, and overall life experience transform in ways you never thought possible. The respect you've been waiting for others to give you has been yours to claim all along. You just needed to understand the rules of the game you were already playing.